Is the United States going to war with Iran? A couple of months ago, we saw aggressions increase with Israel and Iran. Now, the United States and Iran is meeting in Geneva to talk about some of these things. What does this mean for you and me? The first thing I want to say is that Iran, as of right now, is a pretty weak country. It is not financially stable. The United States has an advantage, Iran, in a heavy state of superiority, especially militarily. We've seen this idea of nuclear to Iran be the United States' almost biggest threat, at least in the 2020s. We saw if you guys remember the Obama-Iran deal being such a huge thing, or if you remember the President Biden trying to do this, and obviously President Trump took us out of the Iran deal as well. So President Trump says that the world could see, obviously, to quote him, right, bad things if Iran doesn't agree to a deal. Now, this deal has to do something with nuclear and nuclear war, nuclear aspects. It also has to do with potentially a transition of power. Now, the reason the transition of power is important is because we have to talk about Ayatollah Khamenei, who is the supreme leader of Iran. Now, the supreme leader of Iran is he's in his 80s right now. It is very likely for him to eventually pass down his regime to the next generation, although a lot of these leaders, for some reason, typically like to hold their power. I mean, that's a different story for the day. But the three things you need to understand is obviously Iran's nuclear arsenal keep advancing, right? The fears of a U.S. potential. Obviously, Israel is also involved in this directly. Actually, Marco Rubio is going to Israel on the 28th of February to keep the Israeli government updated. I said that when I first started up. Ayatollah Khamenei is 80 years old. It is a weak regime. Now, what that means is and we've seen the Trump administration use what's called hard power. When you want something, you're not going to impose taxes on them, you're going to go after them. We saw this in Venezuela. So that is a major reason why that this could be, at least political experts do that. There's a really good article by Axios I highly recommend people reading, which kind of recommends that. The second reason why is obviously because tensions, I say quote unquote tensions, are rising. Because those tensions, if you guys remember from months ago that I covered, I believe it was in the new year, it was the tensions a year ago, are still not solved, right? These tensions are still not solved that were lasted about. Obviously, we saw a strike by the United States, and then Iran sort of retaliated. We obviously saw Israel. Obviously, those three countries are directly involved in this, but those tensions were never resolved. They were kind of put on hold. And obviously, going to a quote unquote going to war with a strike doesn't necessarily entail a war. I want to emphasize that this is a really important thing, is that just because Iran is a weak regime, the responses are going to be pretty subpar. However, it is still, you don't want to keep things hot in the Middle East. You ask any foreign policy expert that, you do not want to keep things hot in the Middle East, I would say. Other aspect of this is the fact that a regime change, right? And this is something that I've spoken to foreign policy experts about. I've talked to Iran being a weak regime, but the reality of it being the fact that Iran has an old Ayatollah Khamenei is 80 years old. To be fair, President Trump is also, he's in his 80s, but that's this is a theocracy, a religious theocracy, dictatorship, whatever you want to call them, that in the past has seen, as a result of the economic circumstances of it being a weak regime, has seen a bunch of protests. We covered these protests about a couple of months ago where there were people so concerned about the levels of inflation. The levels of inflation got so high. It was so bad. People couldn't get bread. People couldn't get basic apples and fruit and stuff like that. So protests were also at all-time high. And the fact that Iran actually, it got to the point where President Trump was like, again, we're going to attack you if you're executing protesters. But again, Iran does have a history of human rights violations. So it is a possibility of that existing and all that. The fact that there could be something within the next coming weeks, we just don't know what that look like. Again, the question becomes a proportionality of the response. That's what it comes down to. Is this a whole ass strike? What does that look like and what does that entail? At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to in terms of this Iran versus United States deal. It is something that developing, it's new, but my news analysis head tells me that in a couple of months, a couple of weeks or so, I will be on live telling you that there is a strike, and the question becomes how big is it? What does proportionality look like as well? The update I will give you is that Iran did say there is a framework. They have guiding principles of a framework, But the question becomes, what does the United States really want? And we've seen President Trump take over a country, swoop in and take over an entire country in a day. So can't expect him not to do that as well if they piss him off enough to the point where they do that. I'm going to answer any questions now. We have one question that says, Ryan thinks, I think Iran is pretty strong. That's a up and down question. I would say in terms of their economics, not so much. They're still going through that high levels of inflation. Militarily, you could say that, as well as because of the fact that they have a lot of connections with T groups in the region, as well as they're the direct security threat to a United States ally, which is Israel. Number two, they want a regime change, and they're kind of openly saying it. That's a really good question. We have seen President Trump literally overthrow a government, so we're seeing that. But again, there's one really important where the question becomes, if we talk about a regime change, is this something that Iran voluntarily does? Is because of the fact that their leader's 80 years old and he just says, look, I'm out. I'm buying out of here. There's no chance they attack us tomorrow, right? It would be the opposite. I would say we would attack them, showcase President Trump's strongman ability of getting on the table. But this has not escalated to that point. It's less important what the Iranian people want. The U.S. has never liked the current Iranian regime. I argue the opposite as the editor-in-chief of Bottom Media and all about vulnerable communities, marginalized communities. I would say that what the Iranian people want is pretty important. The United States has definitely never liked the current regime. They never liked Ayatollah Khamenei from the start, especially with the connections, especially with the Israeli government and the H group and all those things going on. Okay, so we have a question that says, surprised Israel didn't instruct Trump to do this earlier. That is a really good question. So Marco Rubio is actually meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu on the 28th to update him about this. So Israel is in direct connections of this. I wouldn't say it's kind of like a, hey, do this for us, more of like, how can we help you for our own interest as well? So, because there is a mutual hatred with Iran, obviously. And I think it's important to mention also the new board, the Gaza board that was announced today, Trump announcing that he's going to give $10 billion to that board as well, of this peace board that he calls, this transition board that he calls, is going to be interesting. I would say, obviously, the board itself does not include any Palestinians. Shocker. But it's extremely important for us to know about, take that into consideration as well. So what about Iran repositioning strike zones, not an escalation? Look, if Iran attacks first, they attack first. I do want to emphasize that Iran would not, you ask any foreign policy experts, Iran knows they really cannot stand a chance right against the United States. So probably going to be the United States doing something first. Obviously, both countries have done, the United States has pulled away. I mean, Trump has said stuff like this. The United States has pulled away troops in Syria. I'm sure the Iranian government is also getting ready. They're going to gear up, get their own kind of troops in reign. The question is, there's a chance that the negotiations will be good. Well, I do know the fact that both Iran and the United States have agreed principle framework, which is a good sign. But President Trump, he's known for hard power, I would say. So that's why people are a little bit like, maybe. Again, guys, there's a really good article by Axios that kind of explains why this could happen. Republicans and Democrats don't want anything to do with Trump. Why do you think Trump's doing this? As I just told you, he's a strongman president. So if he wants something, again, so let me explain to you guys, this is a really important concept. I'll pause for a second, but there's something if you've known me, I've explained this to you a lot, which is called soft power versus hard power. And so soft power is the idea, if we want something, you're going to tax a country, right? If President Biden wanted to do something, he'll tax the country. Obama, same way, soft power, right? I'm going to have an Iran deal with you for sanctions on you. That's what soft power is. President Trump is not a soft power guy. That is not what he does. He's a hard power guy. He's going to go into your country, he's going to take your leader, and that is what he does to get what he wants. And so also a lot of this also has to deal with, obviously, I mean, Iran's assets, oil, et cetera, is a whole other animal. But obviously the safety, I mean, there's a couple of things. One, it appeases Benjamin Netanyahu, appeases Israel, which is an ally. And number two, obviously resources as well. Number three, I mean, if you look at the other countries, right, Saudi, Syria are both kind of appeased by the United States. Now, if you also get a leader in power who's appeased by the United States and Iran, you basically have the entire Middle East. The only country that's left is Iraq, right? And they're not really a threat, I would say, So like if you have the entire, like Iran is probably the biggest threat in the Middle East to the United States. So you're able to have a leader in there who is doing what you want to do. And then you also have the safety of the Israeli government as well, as President Trump probably wants. For those who are new, for those who don't know what the hell is going on here, this is shit you need to know about by your boy, Reporter Rahim. I'm a journalist, independent journalist. I just come on live and talk about issues and stuff that you care about in digestible, fun ways. So be sure to hit the follow button. Be sure to subscribe. So if you want to support independent journalism, now is more important than ever.